for all to see, the signs we've lost our way. When we jail our heroes and applaud our villains and turn our hearts away, like a silent choir too scared to sing the anthem of a braver day, the ballad of Dr Bruce Paix.
Good morning, Bruce Paix. How are you for episode 37? How's your week? How's Christmas and your week? How and the fires and all that?
Yeah, well, I'll touch upon that. It pretty much went according to predictions. So there was a couple of days were a bit sketchy, but we're beyond it now. Although, having said that, I actually smell a smoke at the moment. I've just noticed my shirt still smells of smoke and it's been washed once. So
Yeah. Takes ages to get out, doesn't it? Yeah, wow. And they did flare up a little bit, so you've did your bit. But did you get that bit of family time as well over Christmas, and you got to have some family friend time?
look, just as well I did it the day before because Boxing Day was horrendous and I spent 12 or 14 hours on a fire truck and then I went home and slept for a rather long time. Uh,
Yeah.
so yeah, it was a very good idea to actually bring that forward a bit.
Yeah, no, awesome. So, well, look, this is episode 37, our last one for the year of 2024, and hoping to be able to obviously continue into 2025 for our audience. And obviously we've said that you willing, me willing, we'll continue doing it for as long as we get some viewers. And if we get 10 people continue to view, then it's okay.
Quite, quite. I used to teach registrars one-on-one. So as long as you got one pupil, I think it's worth passing wisdom on.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm keen. I love what you bring to the table, my friend, and I love obviously interacting with you because you're a legend, and we just keep bringing it, eh?
Let's do it.
All right. Now I haven't got anything because I'm just going to let you run with it. But knowing me, when you're talking, I'll probably think of something and chuck something in at the end. So let's get this show on the road.
So Bruce gets a free run by the sound of it. That's pretty good, isn't it?
Bruce gets a free run. Yes, yes. And I do apologise for those people that were used to me with a bit of facial hair. I know I look like a skinned cat at the moment. Anyway.
Yeah, I don't like the clean look. We've discussed that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I get it. I get it. And it wasn't meant to happen, but it was a stuff up before the work Christmas party. And yeah, but anyway, here we are.
It was a
And
coiffure error, was it?
yeah, yeah, that's right. And I was like, stuff it. This comes off. It's all coming off. Anyway, here we go.
Righto. So what are the topics this week? So I'm going to do a quickie update on the Grampians fires. And like I said, Aussie bushfire did what Aussie bushfires do. So nothing new there. No signs of impending collapse. Although I noticed Albo said that it was, but no, it was pretty bad, but it always is. And I'll show you some evidence from past fires.
Mm.
Kick on from that. There was a story about the Labor government had failed to prevent life insurers from using genetic information when calculating premiums for people. And they thought this was terrible because your insurer could actually work out what your actual risk was. And I'm going to discuss that. Should insurance be something that's relatively individual? So your risk is reflected in your premium, or should we socialize that across everybody and make everybody pay, even the people who are better at it? So that's an interesting thing. And while we're at it, if we're going to have a one size fits all for everybody, why do we have one size fits all price for money, also known as the interest rate? And why are we always waiting on the RBA to tell us what our price of borrowing money is? Story about the polar ice caps, because apparently 20 odd years ago, they said they'd be gone within 10 years. Well, 10 years after that, they're even bigger. So I wasn't able to reach Greta Thunberg, but it does seem like they keep pushing the date of the apocalypse out, don't they? And you get that with all these doomsday cults, and they learn, because the first thing they do is they tell you, the second coming and the end of the earth is going to be next Friday. and they all sort of get together and hold hands and sing songs and wait, and it doesn't happen.
No.
And then they recalculate and they say, sorry, it was next Friday, not this Friday, it's the one after.
Yeah, we moved
And
in
then
a day long.
they all get together, it doesn't happen again.
Mm.
And then they get a bit brighter and they say, well, it's coming soon, can't say exactly when. And seems like 20 years is too soon, isn't it, with climate?
100%. And this is the massive push from Al Gore. He's one of the biggest ones who've been pushing it for decades, hasn't he? And none of his predictions have ever come through. And we've spoken before in some of our episodes, Bruce, about what's his name? Flannery. Is it Flannery? Australia's Flannery?
Yep.
I mean, how many times has he been on there about catastrophic, there'd be no water in the Warragamba Dam and, everything else like that. And, it's just all, but anyway, I thought you might have had Greta on speed dial or even Al. Not the case,
And these climate grifters, of course, whilst they're all telling us that we're all going to flood and burn and so forth, they're also the ones who are buying these sea level properties. And Tim Flannery did that. Barack Obama did that. I'm pretty sure Greta, she's probably got a waterfront property somewhere.
Yeah. And just getting back to that interest rate thing, we might talk about it later, but I was going to mention there's a company from New Zealand, I think, or I think it's New Zealand, called Money, and I think they do a similar concept where they actually borrow to people, and their interest rate is dependent on the individual person's circumstances. So anyway, it might be something to chat into when we talk about it.
Should be. I've got a new segment, and it flows on from a week or two ago when we had that picture of Humpty Dumpty in Alice in Wonderland, and Humpty was saying that words mean whatever I want them to mean. And I'm going to speak to that in the context of the South Australian government is apparently investing in a chicken killing unit.
Oh, okay.
And I question whether that's the right use of the word. And finally, for all those who think that the world's just getting worse and, we're all about to be overwhelmed by natural calamity, this is actually the 20-year anniversary of the Boxing Day tsunami, which affected Thailand and Indonesia principally. And I actually was in Aceh after the tsunami as a member of one of the disaster relief teams. And I'm going to show you a few photos, and I'm just going to ponder on the futility of thinking that us tiny little specks can affect any sort of worldwide process, be it climate, be it disasters, whether we name it. We are insignificant on the face of this earth, and to think that we can manage geological and planetary forces is just astonishing.
Yeah.
So that's where we're going.
And it's interesting you mentioned that, because I've only just recently seen some more images from the Japanese tsunami, which was also massive, huge devastation. I was seeing some of the images from that. It was just, again, was just astronomical.
Yeah, and you can't argue or negotiate with nature. It's like trying to negotiate with a white pointer. Sorry, it's not happening. You've got an irresistible force there that's going to do what it wants to do. And scale that up to a planetary level or even beyond that, because Earth's climate is not determined here on Earth. It all becomes, mind-blowingly pointless, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of natural forces that can't be controlled, final update from the Grampians bushfires. And last week, we mentioned that there was a bad weather period coming up around the Christmas Boxing Day period. And I thought this was likely to be an issue because there was many dozens of kilometres of fire front, any one of which could act as a source for fire escaping into the grasslands, particularly to the east. And sure enough, that's what happened. So on Boxing Day, we had some truly dreadful fire weather conditions in Western Victoria with the strongest winds I've ever experienced on the back of a fire truck. It was literally rocking the truck. There was a rain of embers, hitting you in the face, such that even through our goggles, I was still getting stuff in my eyes, couldn't see anything. And to reiterate something that I said last week is that, trees are a very dangerous thing at fires, and in the passage of the fire front, it gets very dark because of the smoke, and a lot of trees fail early, much earlier than you would think. And sure enough, that happened to us. So this is a picture I took from the top of the fire truck. And we were transiting down this road, heading for some structures that we wanted to protect. And as we did so, the fire actually crossed the road in front of us. And we couldn't go backwards because there was a lot of fallen timber on the road that we just worked our way around, and there was no way we were going to reverse up through that, particularly with fire about to impact us on the left. So we're actually forced just to set off the sprinklers and drive through it anyway, which, I mean, it wasn't particularly scary. I've been hotter on the back of a fire truck, but if you're a civilian in a car and you were faced with that, you can't see what you're doing. A tree will stop you and the fire will. So don't leave your house 5 minutes before a fire comes and get on the road. Stay in the house. It's far more protective anyway.
Yeah, that's right. And just on that, Bruce, how do you go? Do you put some fire retardant moisturizer on your beard or something when those embers are coming towards your face? What's happened? How do you protect your beard, mate?
Look, I've got to tell you, at one point I did smell a bit of burning hair, although I haven't been able to actually find the area of impact. But yeah, I did at one point think, I hope the whole thing doesn't catch fire, don't I?
So I often think about that. But anyway, yep. So stay in your home and defend it, or get out early. Do not leave it at the last minute because you'll have trees coming across the road.
Yep. And in fact, we at another time we did have to stop because the road was blocked by a tree after the fire had just whipped through. And whilst we were cutting that up, the tree next to it fell over and missed our truck by about a metre.
Wow.
So, yeah, dangerous place to be. Just don't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, well, isn't the community lucky to have a outlawed criminal, not convicted person like you, been able to assist and put your life on the line for the community, like there are so many others that are doing that. So, yeah.
Enemy of the state is my preferred.
That's right. Enemy of the state.
Preferred pronouns at the moment.
Yep, enemy of the state. Yep. Ironic, isn't it? But there we go.
Yep. Okay. And before all the media talking heads start telling us that this was an unprecedented fire and it was due to climate change, and that's already started, Albo's already onto that. As I mentioned previously, the great bulk of volunteer firefighting now is done by 50-plus-year-old men. And they've been at it for a while and they've got memories. And the crew on my truck was talking a fair bit about what they called the Mount Lubra fire, which was a previous fire in virtually the same spot. So I went home and I did a bit of digging into that. And what I've got on the left is the Mount Lubra fire scar. And that was in 2006, so about 20 years earlier. I'll go into 2025. And the similarity between the two fires is really quite startling. So the Mount Lubra fire started in the Grampians, burnt for a week or more, and then it escaped out into the grasslands to the east, where it threatened various towns. So on the left-hand side here, there's the Mount Lubra fire. And here are the three main risk towns. You've got Wellora in the south, Moyston in the middle, and Halls Gap on the top. Now, move over to the right-hand picture. That's the scar from the current Southern Grampians fires. And I've drawn in the same towns. So you've got Moyston, you've got Wellora, and you've got Halls Gap. So the pattern of the fire was pretty much identical 20 years ago. And in fact, the Mount Lubra fire was significantly bigger, but it did the same thing. Lightning strike started it in the Grampians, burnt for a week until we had a bad fire day, and it escaped out into the grasslands and threatened these towns. Didn't quite reach any of them. So there's nothing unprecedented about what happened in the last week and a half in the Grampians.
So it's not climate change, Bruce. It's not man-made climate change. Come on.
Well, if climate change is responsible, I would note that the CO2 level in 20 years ago was 382 parts per million. And I think it's about 425 now. So if anything, you've got evidence there that climate change is making the fires smaller, haven't you?
No, it's a class.
So what did our wise rulers and our experts tell us about this? What was their take on this? Well, Airbus Albo flew in and flew around the fire zone in a helicopter a day or two back. And what he said was that natural disasters were becoming more frequent and more intense because of climate change. So I've just shown you that they're a regular occurrence and they're no different to what they used to be. But his take on it is that, no, it's happening more and it's worse. Now, what was the other take on it? Well, if you look over at the right-hand side, the Australian ran this story on the front page that says, we've really got to think about moving out of these areas rather than rebuilding in them. Have you heard of that principle before? Is there a name for that principle, do you think?
There's two being bandied around. One is the one that WEF uses, which is climigration. But our friend Kate Mason, who does amazing research, just talks about a managed retreat.
Managed retreat. So they want us to retreat because of this unprecedented fire that was 50% smaller than the one that happened 20 years ago. And now, what are we retreating from? Because almost all of the losses in the recent Grampians fires were natural bush. At last count, I think there were 4 houses lost and about a dozen sheds. So how many people are going to have to move because of that threat? And where are they going to go? Are we going to go down to Melbourne and get stabbed instead? Or have tobacco shops burned down? Is it safer for us to be there? And, at what point, if it saves one life, well, no lives were lost. As far as I know, no injuries. And a mere handful of structures.
Well, that doesn't fit the propaganda narrative, though, Bruce. Because we know where it's all going, and then the insurance companies will come in because the government's bleating about it so much, and the media, and they'll say, well, look, the government said, and these experts have said that it's going to cost more for you to rebuild, and you're in danger, so we're going to up your insurance premiums to triple the amount, and you won't be able to insure your property. We see this picture, don't we?
Yep, and I'm going to talk about insurance a bit later, but let me just tell you one of the scams they run to tell you that the losses are getting bigger. One thing is inflation, which we've talked about. So the value of the measuring instrument, the dollar, gets smaller by 10% a year. So even if you get exactly the same fire 20 years later, I don't know what 10% compounded over 20 years is, but it's several hundred%. So even if it's exactly the same as the Mount Lubra fire, they can tell us the losses were 3 times greater. That's one thing. And the other thing, of course, is our population is going up all the time. So more so-called assets are being built in all of these places. Houses are getting bigger, more of them. So, of course, if there are losses, there's going to be more of them. But it's no different in Melbourne. Melbourne's getting big too.
Yeah. Exactly right. And like you say, inflation, the cost of housing is way outpaced many other things. So, to insure a property that's worth more is obviously more too.
Yeah. And like I say, I'll come back to insurance in a bit. But okay. So not only did Albo tell us that, we all really can't afford to live here anymore because, we couldn't possibly tolerate the loss of 3 houses and half a dozen sheds ever again. But Albo was quick to roll out the OPM, quick to roll out the money. So him and the Victorian Premier, Jacinda Allen, they offered help to the victims, offered help. But it wasn't Albo opening his own checkbook. It was Albo opening yours and my checkbook. And amongst the things he was going to offer 13 weeks worth of pay to people who were impacted. Now, I'm not sure how many people were impacted because, like I say, there were very few structures lost. There are a hell lot of volunteer hours put in. Maybe they want to pay me. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that'd be nice. I think that'd, I think the people like that, the community workers, should be getting some compensation if there's going to be money be thrown around.
No, we don't want it, mate. We want you provide the trucks, we'll provide the manpower. Yes, manpower.
Yep.
Okay, so Albo was quick to come in and say OPM, plenty of OPM for everybody to make it all right. And the public fell for it, and they always fall for it. And I hate to say that because the public also was calling on the government to do something. And the Halls Gap businesses, which are hurting because tourism was affected for a week or more, they immediately said that they needed money off the government. And we talked about that. No, they're not asking for Albo to give them money. They're asking for you and I to give them money.
Yep.
And I've never holidayed in the Grampians, and I actually don't think it's right for me to support a business which has now been threatened at least twice in 20 years, and therefore that's a predictable business risk. So if you let these people operate their businesses without carrying their own risk insurance, whether it's fire or loss of business due to closures, then you create what's called a moral hazard. So you encourage these people to keep operating that way. If instead what happened is you just said to them, sorry, you're not getting any money, you should have insured for that, or you should have planned for it in your business, then they do plan for it. And businesses that didn't plan for it go bust, leave, and you've got a better quality of business for the risk involved for next time. But no, the local businesses just said, something bad happened. Can we please have money?
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted a wealth transfer from you and I, who are not involved and are prepared, to them who were involved and were not prepared.
Mm-hmm.
And we should resist this, because this just enforces or reinforces government dependency. If every time something bad goes wrong, you just hold your hand out to the government, you become completely reliant on the government, which of course is what the government wants.
Mm.
And step yourselves back 30 or 40 years to the Whitlam era. This is what the government did with medicine in Australia. They introduced a government will pay for it system called Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
And the man in the street thought that was great, because he doesn't have to pay. I mean, newsflash, yeah, you're paying through your taxes and inflation. Mm-hmm. But the other thing is, it made the doctors dependent on Medicare as well. So the citizens and the doctors now have to fit into the government model to get healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
So even if you go into a private health facility, there's still a Medicare payment on quite a few of the items. And so what this means is that you are now dependent on the government for your own personal healthcare. Instead of you going to the GP and paying the bill, you now go to the GP, who gets paid by the government instead, via you, but it looks like they're getting paid by the government. And what that means is they get controlled by the government. And we saw how well that worked during COVID, didn't we?
Mm-hmm.
95% of doctors just rolled over and did what the government said, because saying no meant they got cut off from Medicare, from insurance, from registration. They couldn't say no because they were now working for the government. And same. If you outsource your risk management to the government for any risk, whether it's your health, a fire, an earthquake, you name it, if you outsource your risk to the government, you're now working for the government, and so you're dependent on the government.
Yeah.
And we've seen where that leads.
Yeah, well, it's many people calling for this, like, that whole universal basic income. The government should be there to support anybody and fill the gap of, everything else.
Moral hazard, OPM.
Mm-hmm.
Responses to that.
Yep, other people's money.
And that sort of segues into this related story. And this is where the life insurance industry is apparently going to do something outrageous, and that is use relevant information to calculate your premium. So this story said that the government had failed to close a loophole which would allow life insurers to consider genetic information when they were offering you life insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So, primer for people who haven't worked it out, what insurance companies do is they buy your risk of something happening, the risk that your house burns down, the risk that you crash the car, the risk that you need medical care. They buy that risk off you, but they pay you less than it actually is worth. That's how they make a profit. So, in other words, there's a certain level of risk, and they charge you more than that to make a profit. Now, if I've got a lower level of risk because of my lifestyle or my genetics or my preparation or my driving, whatever, then I should be charged less, because if I'm not being charged less, then I'm subsidising somebody else who's a worse risk, and that circles immediately back to the Halls Gap businesses. Rather than them paying the true cost of the risk to their business, they want it outsourced. They want someone else to pay for it. Now, we already have differential insurance rates in a small degree for some people. So, for example, if you're a 16-year-old alcoholic with a poor driving record, then your car insurance premium is going to be much higher than mine. So there's already a precedent for doing that, and there should be.
I think
Also do
UE started doing that quite a long time. We went to UE and they looked at all factors like, how often you drive, what sort of job do you do, what are you involved in risky sport, and which
yeah,
is standard stuff, right?
which is what they do. I don't want to be cross-subsidizing the bad driver with lots of alcohol-involved accidents because I'm going to be paying money for their risk, and I don't want to do that. I want my own risk to be the determinant of
That's
my
right.
own
And they
expense.
can pay more, correct?
And so that should apply to life insurance, should apply to Medicare, should apply to anything. But in a socialist world, we don't have individual assessments, we have socialized risk.
That's right, exactly. And it's right now with the health, like you say with Medicare, like if you've got a great lifestyle, you have some tests that say that you're really healthy, you eat well, you exercise, all that sort of stuff. Why should you pay more premiums on health than others?
And in
Or
fact, with
life insurance?
Medicare, if anything, if you're healthier and more productive, then you're going to be paying more in tax anyway.
Yeah.
So it's a
Yeah,
double.
that's right. That's right. It's a double whammy. And you're gonna visit the doctor less. You're going to need prescriptions less. So you're not going to benefit from the Medicare levy that you're paying anyway. Yeah,
I
correct.
think it's the old meme, isn't it? A fine is a tax for doing something wrong. Tax is a fine for doing something right.
I like that. Yeah.
And here's another take on that. So this was a story about a struggling computer game manufacturer that was forced to pay what was called an onerous rate for a loan. So they wanted to get a business loan, but they had to pay a lot for it. Well, good. That means that the lender determined that their risk was high. So, if you're a good risk with a good credit rating and so forth, then your rate should be lower because the risk that the lender will lose their money in the deal is lower. They don't have to have that insurance premium on it, if you like. So it's another example of why risk should be individualized in everything, health, insurance, money, whatever. And forcing everybody onto the same standard, in other words, socialism, it just reinforces bad behavior and makes the better performing members of society subsidize the others.
Yeah.
And on that topic, why is it that there's a one-size-fits-all price for money? One size price fits all for life insurance, drive insurance. Why is there a size fits all price for money? Why does my housing loan rate depend on some central bureaucrat telling me what it is when my risk is not the same as someone else?
Yeah.
We know how well one-size-fits-all solutions worked in COVID, don't we?
Yes, that's all right.
Yeah. So we should resist any sort of central planners trying to come up with a single solution for everybody because it never works and it penalises people like you and I who are prudent and productive.
Yeah, well, this is the problem, though, isn't it? Like, because a mum and dad who've got a mortgage, raising a family, they'll go to the bank and say, "Well, we want a better interest rate," and they go, "Well, you've got what, $400,000, $500,000 loan? Nah, sorry, but you've got these big bankers or wealthy people, whatever, and not taking anything from them." That say, well, I've got this amount of money, I can borrow this much, and credit, and my interest rate should be lower, which is what essentially what you're saying is the average person isn't going to be in a position to negotiate their interest rate with their lender. They're going to always look at someone someone that's already in a better position to start with.
Yeah, but if there was no central planning of the interest rate in the first place, then the lender would have to determine on an individual basis what your risk is. You would go down to the bank and say, I want to borrow. Well, we had this discussion before. I want to rent a certain amount of money off you. And the bank would do its due diligence and work out what your credit risk was, and that would be factored into the loan. Your credit risk is poor, then they've got to charge you more. This is why, Wallet Wizard and payday lenders are charging you 20, 30, 50% per annum because the risk that the person will default is very high.
Yes.
So instead of the bank basically just being told by the government that this is the across-the-board rate, it should be individualised. Yeah, and I mean banks really have
determination anyway, don't they? I mean, the rate can be set whatever, but if they chose to and wanted to buck the trend, they could reduce it by way more than the competitors, couldn't they, if they wanted to?
There's a limit to that because government policy does feed into the price of money for the bank themselves.
Oh, well, there you go.
So
interesting.
All right, let's segue from that experts are baffled, trust the experts segment to this trust the experts segment.
Okay,
Now you're chuckling, Mark. Why are you chuckling at that cutie picture there?
It's just the propaganda I've got. It's a visual image of the propaganda that's been shoved down people's throats through the media, isn't it? Right? You know, the icebergs are melting, the polar bears are, they're getting extinct, and the ice sheets are melting, and all this stuff that we're meant to believe because of human-induced global warming.
And we talked about that. That was in the intro. They're telling us things are just getting worse. Well, remember how they did tell us that the polar ice was just about to disappear, and that was another example of what we were doing to the planet? Well, apparently 20 years ago, the BBC ran this story telling us that there would be no ice in the Arctic at all by 2013. And I made the point previously that, in fact, to have any ice at the Arctic or the Antarctic is abnormal on the Earth. And more than 70% of the time, there is no ice in either place because the Earth is generally hotter than it is now. But leaving that aside, 20 years ago, they said in 10 years, there'll be no ice left in the Arctic. So how's that aged, that particular story, Mark?
Yeah, so I don't know if I believe them, Bruce.
Well, here's how that's aged. So on the left is where it actually was 10 years ago. Remember, there's supposed to be no ice 10 years ago. So 10 years prior to that, they said by 2013, I think it was, the ice had all be gone in the Arctic. Well, it wasn't all gone. There was just this tiny remnant, as you can see on the graphic on the left. And fast forward another 10 years, this is the extent of sea ice in the Arctic now. And in fact, it's a quarter bigger. It's 26% bigger than it was in 2012 when it was supposed to be all gone. So these apparently are the experts we're supposed to be trusting.
Yeah. And remind me again, what were the orange lines?
I do not know what that was. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But the white is the sort of the current extent of ice.
Yeah, I wonder if that they're talking about whether that might have been from when they got recorded history. That might have been the size of the sheet from recorded. I'm not sure, but anyway.
Look, I don't know. But again, if you read Ian Plimer's work, ice sheets have covered, way down into Europe, halfway down through the United States, across Germany. The extent has been much bigger in the past, but it's also been zero.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and that's
anyway. 20 years ago. 20 years ago, they told us there wouldn't be any in 10 years, and 20 years hence, there's not only ice, there's more of it.
Yeah.
And I make the point here, how did they know to say that? Where did they come up with that prediction?
Was it modelling, Bruce?
The answer was modelling, Mark. You've done your homework.
No, I've listened to you long enough.
They had
episode 37, mate. I'm slowly starting to get a little bit.
Well, hopefully the viewers are slowly picking up a few things too. So here's the thing I want to make about models. Models are not data. They are predictions about the future. And as Yogi Berra said, making predictions about the future is difficult. So models are not data. Models are also not the real thing. They're a representation of the real thing, and they're a simplified representation. There's no way they have as many moving parts as the real thing does. And finally, models are designed by someone, and they're meant to look like something once you've put them together. So your designer comes up with an idea that will produce a preconceived outcome.
A
and it doesn't work. Obviously in the climate, time and time again, their models are not shown to be true. And in fact, they're often the opposite. So models are not data. Don't fall for that.
Yep. Yep.
So having said all that, having said that models are limited, that 20 years ago they've made a prediction which didn't even work in 10 years, let alone in 20. And in fact, Arctic ice is now 25% bigger than it was 10 years ago, 26%. What are the experts now saying? How are they reacting to that model failure? This is how they're reacting. So this is another story this year. Again, with the obligatory polar bear, this time emaciated. Look how thin that polar bear is.
Yeah, so what they've actually gone from a decrease in polar bears, and that didn't wash because obviously that there was an increase or there wasn't a decrease at all. So now they're saying they're going to be starving. Well, they say you can't make this up. Old Alada and Hoodie, shout out to your boys. But anyway,
you have to make this stuff up, I think.
Yeah, they have to make this stuff up. Yep.
And here's a quote from that article. It says, "With the Arctic sea ice cover shrinking rapidly." Where do they get that figure from? Shrinking rapidly. It's shrinking in the expansing direction. It says polar bears are forced onto land for longer periods, risking health degradation and starvation.
Wow.
So the experts are either lying to us or incompetent. Take your pick.
Or both. Probably both.
Take your pick.
I wonder if they're photoshopping in that one, but anyway.
All right. Next update, and this is our inflation update. And we've spoken many times about inflation and said that inflation is probably of the order of 10% compound per year over the last 20 years. And I got that figure by looking at the price of another form of money, that being gold, and seeing how much that changed compared to government currency over that time. That's where I got my 10% compound per year. So this story in The Australian tells us that the cost of nearly 60 goods and services exploded this year. It says gas, fats and insurance are up by more than 30%. And I've mentioned previously, my car insurance has gone up 30% this year and 30% the year before. So almost doubling. And I have had no claims in that period of time. And they mentioned 20% for other goods, including some food goods. So when the experts release their official figures and tell you inflation is 3% or 4% or even 6%, just compare it to reality. Compare it to how much things are actually rising in price and ask yourself again whether our official economists are dishonest or incompetent, because it's one of the two.
Yeah.
And I make the point again that the source of inflation is the government. Inflation does not equal prices going up. Inflation equals buying power of your dollar going down. And your dollar is a government-managed, government-issued purchasing instrument. And it loses value at 10% a year because the government prints too much of it.
Yeah.
They do that deliberately to pay off their own debts. They inflate them away, and also to give free money to all their cronies and all their stupid projects.
Yep.
So
Snowy Hydro up to about 20 billion now or something, and plus all the others.
how is Florence going?
I don't know. I haven't looked up Florence. I don't know if she's moving again, but I think they started another one. They purchased another one or built another one to get start at the other end or do something else. Yeah. I think they got 3 or something of them now.
They might need a Florence burying machine, although actually I'll correct myself. I think Florence has already buried herself.
Yeah, that's right. And that's only just one bloody project. But anyway.
Right, let's transition back into a newly forming segment, which we started a couple of weeks ago. And that's the Alice in Wonderland words can mean whatever I want them to mean segment. And for those who don't know, that was something that Humpty Dumpty said to Alice in Wonderland. So the meaning of words is fluid. We can change it. It can mean whatever you like. Well, the South Australian government has hopped aboard that train in the last week, because here's a story which says the South Australian government has invested in a mass depopulation unit.
Hmm.
And no, that's not the Nazi Party saying that. That's the South Australian government.
I was going to say.
And the story goes on to say that they've spent millions to produce a mobile lab for killing chickens to manage the avian flu outbreak.
Mm.
So on the left, story says that's an investment. On the right is a dictionary definition of what an investment is.
Mm.
So investment refers to putting your money in an asset with the aim of generating income.
Mm.
So for the South Australian government to spend millions of dollars on a program that will kill chickens, in other words, destroy assets, is not an investment.
Mm.
And governments are increasingly prone to use the word investment when they really should be using the word spending.
Mm.
And in fact, they should probably be using the word wasteful spending.
Yes. And follow it up by OPM.
Exactly. Well, that's where do they get the money from?
That's right. Well, just to clarify, because people, I guess, are just so blasé that the government's got all this money. They sometimes forget that it actually comes from other people, i.e. them.
And I make the point to the South Australian government, just in case they hadn't thought of this, destroying your food supply is not an investment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's a massive attack on our food supply in many aspects, isn't there?
And look at that story. Bird flu spread means 500,000 chickens must be culled. Who says they have to be culled?
Yeah.
Did they all die of bird flu? Did any survive?
Mm.
And in fact, it's usually the opposite. You get a 500,000 bird chicken shed, you get 8 dead birds, and trust me, in a shed that big, you get more than 8 deaths a day. Trust me in that.
Mm.
They'll PCR test a few of them using some overclocked false positive PCR test. Then they'll tell you it's chicken flu. Then they'll kill the lot.
Mm-hmm. Trust the plan, Bruce. Trust the plan.
Trust the plan. It's an investment, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, with investments like that, we're all going to be pretty rich soon, aren't we?
What's the use of being rich? You're going to be dead.
And this story on the right sort of segues into that. And it says that the bee industry has to adapt to the Varroa mite. And you might remember in the last year or two, there have been a number of bee kills on the same premise that this infectious threat, the Varroa mite, had gotten into certain hives, and we had to kill off those hives to stop it spreading.
Yeah, I think Kate Mason speaks into that quite a bit as well in regards to that topic as well. The big farce.
I make the same point with Varroa mite in bees that I make with bird flu in chickens. How did it get into those in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got a beehive and a Varroa mite gets into it, how did it get there?
Yeah.
Well, it came from the environment, came out of the sky, somehow it got there.
Mm.
Same for your bird flu. How did it get into a commercial chicken shed? Well, the story they're telling us is that, a non-sick duck from China flew up from Antarctica and gave it to it. But in both cases, here's my point. It came from outside.
Yeah.
So unless you destroy all of the source outside, you're wasting your time. And this is, of course, what we did in COVID. We tried to hide from COVID despite the fact that there was an external source, which meant you could never hide from it. It was always there.
Yep.
And what that means is that elimination strategies don't work because you've got an external reservoir that just keeps bringing the problem up again. So rather than killing 500,000 chickens, maybe you got to say, if it's real, okay, got into the shed, I lost some birds. And I bet bird flu in a chicken shed is the same as real flu in a human population. I bet it kills a few of the old sick birds, and I bet most of them are fine.
Yeah.
And I bet it's the same with bees too.
Yeah, that's right.
So you can't manage this threat by destroying the at-risk population. At some point, you've got to say, okay, we'll take the losses because there's nothing else we can do.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. The other thing you could do is put mechanisms in place in China to stop ducks partying with bats.
I think what you're saying is that when a duck and a pangolin love each other very much, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, you got to be careful of those parties, man. They get pretty wild apparently, and then they fly across the ocean and infect countries. Anyway.
So just to finish this out, the South Australian government's $2 million spent on culling chickens is going to be the equivalent of destroying the town to save it. And we've used that graphic before. And
Yeah.
that was from the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Where to destroy it and kill everybody to protect them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sounds familiar.
It does.
So that's a sort of new segment. That's my Humpty Dumpty words mean whatever I want them to mean segment. And I've just picked out a few other examples of Humpty Dumpty words, and you can probably add some of your own, but here's a few that I just quickly came up with. So calling abortion healthcare, that's an example of words meaning whatever you want them to mean. Calling abortion women's rights is the same, particularly when over 50% of aborted babies are female. Calling abortion reproductive rights, that's Humpty Dumpty as well, because it's actually the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's contraception, not reproduction. Calling trans women women, that's a Humpty Dumpty concept. And calling green energy clean energy or wind and solar free energy. They're all the same. These are all things that have crept into the language which are false. They're actually wrong. It's the wrong use of the words. And anytime they call wind and solar free, and they do run that, you know, the sun's free, the wind's free. Newsflash, gold's free too. It's in the ground. All you got to do is burn thousands of litres of diesel and using millions of dollars of machinery to get it out. But it's free, right?
Yeah, free energy. So they just play on words, isn't it? This is that whole, propaganda, psychological kind of warfare, isn't it? But using words, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So let's add a couple together. Investing in wind and solar. That's got to be a double whammy, doesn't it?
Yeah, investing in, yeah, that's right. Absolutely. Especially when wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine.
Yes. All right, another update. The update on the government is coming for your super. And you know, I should have put the word reform in there. I should have put tax reform in there because tax reform, of course, means tax increase. Should have put that in there.
Yes.
Anyway, here's the latest. They are coming for your super update. And look at that. The government eyes further superannuation reforms to limit bequests. So remember what superannuation is. It is forced saving. So money is taken out of your pay packet during your life. It's locked up in super until you retire, and you have limited options for how you can invest it within super until you get it back at 60, 65, 67, whatever it is. And I've said before that the government will not be able to resist that pot of money because governments can't resist any pot of money.
Yeah, of course.
And now they're saying that having forced you to save that money in that vehicle against your will during your working life, they don't want you passing it on if you die. So that's what the bequests thing is about. So if you've still got money left in your super account when you die, and let's face it, who can predict the future well enough to spend the last dollar the last day they die?
That's right.
They're either going to run out early or there's going to be some left. Well, if there's any left, the government doesn't want that getting passed on to your kids.
Well, if you've got effective modelling, Bruce, you could probably predict it, couldn't you?
That'd be a one-size-fits-all solution, not an individualised solution, Mark. So got you there.
You did.
So a repeat warning to anybody, the government steals from you all the time and they lie to you all the time. And I would be wary of putting extra money into super on the premise that you're going to get it back with some sort of bonus later on, because the risk that you run is that your government might betray you and not give you some or all of it back later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're always going to be coming at it. There's always people pushing for, because more people now are, pulling their super out of industry funds. They're looking at investing in property, self-managed, so setting up self-managed super funds and that. So now they're looking at ways that they can hit people up, and there's people banting around the idea of taking away incentives for I guess mum and dad investors in investment properties and all that sort of stuff. So there's always an angle for them to kind of pull the rug out from under you.
Well, industry would love it if everybody's forced into an industry super fund. So they're
Also,
the large funds.
yep.
And then they've got that money to play with. And let's say it's the building industry super fund, they might put it all into building.
Mm-hmm.
Or the government might pass a law that says, 25% of your industry super fund has to be building solar farms and green bonds or whatever. So, yeah, it's a way of compulsively extracting money from you and then giving it to some other body to play with for decades.
Yep.
And then probably taxing it on the way back to you anyway.
Yeah, exactly right.
Do you want your superannuation being spent on government approved projects like rainbow crossings and freeways to nowhere that don't get built, or submarines that get cancelled, or you name
20
it?
years, yeah, or we get to see them in 20 years, yeah, absolutely. And
Is
I
that
know
what you
that
want?
Gerard Rennick's really hot on the tail of them with money, because he said that super is people's money. They should be able to choose to do what they want to, even pay it off their own mortgage, whatever they want to do.
Yep. Trust me, I'm a better investor than the government is, and I know what investment means. And, 5 or 8 years ago, I set up my own self-managed super with the intent of investing in precious metals and Bitcoin, and the South Australian government would not give me my money. They refused to transfer my money from the government fund into my own private fund, so as they could keep playing with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, if I'd bought precious metals and Bitcoin 5 years ago, I'd be worth 10 times more than I'm worth now. Thank you very much, government. Thank you for keeping me safe.
Yeah, yeah. And, there's no recourse for you to, challenge them for that or anything either, because it's just the way the system's set up against you.
Yeah. It's they're the biggest mafia, and they're not actually interested in what you think. You just have to buy their product or bad things happen to you.
Become the enemy of the state, Bruce.
Not hard, is it? And true story, I told my kids 10 years ago, I will be an enemy of the state within your lifetime. That's aged better than some government predictions.
That's right. That modelling was good.
You're a beautiful man. You're a beautiful man.
I'm a bit of a pleb, but anyway, you get that.
All right. I think this is my finish out story. So this story was in the Australian a day or two ago, and it points out that the Indian Ocean tsunami was 20 years ago. It's called the Boxing Day tsunami years ago. And on that date, there was a massive undersea earthquake off the western tip of Sumatra, which caused a massive disruption in the seabed, which caused a massive tsunami to come ashore, particularly in Aceh on the western tip of Sumatra, but it also affected Thailand and Sri Lanka and other parts of that area. And I was a member of one of the disaster recovery teams that was sent to Aceh a week or so after that, where we did medical care for the injured. And one of the things that showed me is just how powerful nature is, and the concept that we can manage it, or the climate, or any particular disaster, you name it, earthquakes, bushfires, tsunami, you name it. No, when nature strikes back, you are along for the ride. And rather than trying to manage it in advance, the best thing you can do is adapt to the risk. Know that the risk is there and adapt to it. So in the case of bushfires, rather than trying to put every fire out, we discussed last week, that doesn't work. What you can do instead is you can clear up your property and make sure that when the fire comes, it'll run across it without costing you your house and your sheds. And that's what I do.
Yep.
So here's what a real disaster looks like. So 20 years ago, massive earthquake and followed by a tsunami. And on the left, you've got a section of a satellite image from Sorry, I'll just go up one from Arche. And that was the before picture. So that's a seaside piece of land, and you can see multiple structures and roads and houses. And on the right, you've got the after picture. So after the tsunami went through, the next pass of the satellite showed that. So that entire piece of land has basically had water go completely across it and inundate it. And in fact, the Aceh tsunami didn't just go across the beachfront. It went many kilometres inland. I don't know how far, but it was at least 10 kilometres inland that beach wave went. And it went all the way into the centre of a city of, I think, 200,000 people and killed about half of them. So there was 100,000 plus casualties and half the city was gone. And here's some pictures I took back then. So this was in the city centre of Aceh. That's at least 8 or 10 kilometres inland.
Wow.
And it's just this sea of broken buildings which have been crunched up into driftwood. Vast amounts of it. Some buildings surviving, but this is 8 or 10K inland.
Yeah.
Boats, that was in the city centre, so that's not a particularly large fishing boat, but it's been carried 8 or 10 kilometres inland and left in the street. All of the shops in the city centre, a lot of them consisted of a lower floor shop and a couple of stories above it with presumably accommodation. And the force of that wave had pushed in the roller doors in the front of each of these shops and completely filled them with debris.
Yeah.
So the water had gone at least as high as one floor and pushed vehicles and all the other trash in there. And of course, people who were caught in this really had very little chance.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Here's another example. Again, that's up in the middle of the city, and you've just got multiple fishing boats there that have just been packed together against a bridge. And if ever you've been in or seen a flood in Australia where you've got a river in flood and debris coming down with the water and impacting the side of a bridge, well, they had half a city's worth of debris as the water flowed in and then back out again. As you went further towards the sea, there was less and less remaining. So in this near the sea picture, you can see there's a couple of houses that are still standing, although they're badly damaged, and they were the more robust concrete structures. And in the foreground, all you've got left really is the foundations and trash sitting over the top of them. And in fact, the closer the sea to you went, and if you look down this road, you can see palm trees. That's where the beach was. So as you got closer and closer to the beach, there was less and less until there was nothing. At most, you had a concrete foundation, but everything else was gone.
Amazing those trees survived.
Yeah, that's right. It is,
it's crazy, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And obviously some didn't, but yeah. But a tree is a much less resistant to a wave than say a house is. So that's what Aceh looks like. That's what a real disaster looks like. Put that into context when we get a 75,000 hectare fire in the Grampians that kills a few houses and kills nobody. And bear in mind what a real disaster is, and also bear in mind the futility of you thinking that us tiny humans scrabbling about the face of the planet really have any power to affect what nature wants to do and does do.
Oh, absolutely. And we've talked about it before, about when a volcano farts and stuff like that, and the stuff that it puts up into the atmosphere and how that affects the weather for the next few months and that as well.
Yeah. It's futility to try and do anything, and it's certainly futility if the something you're trying to do consists of taxing people more and then destroying their wealth by investing in solar farms and wind turbines and things that actually destroy wealth.
Yeah. Yep.
It's futile.
Yeah.
Adaptation is the only thing that makes sense in the face of those powers. And our wise rulers know this. They don't really think they're saving the planet.
Mm.
If they did, they wouldn't be buying their seaside front properties like Tim Flannery and Barack Obama. They wouldn't be flying around the planet in their private jets like Bill Gates and everybody else. They'd actually be doing something about it. And they'd be putting nuclear plants up left, right, and centre because that is the only way to solve this problem.
Yeah.
The only way to solve this problem is nuclear. If you believe that's what the problem is, the only way to solve it is nuclear. I don't believe it is the problem, but there you go.
Like you say, nor do they. It's all a scam too. You know, it all ties in this whole bigger picture, isn't it, that we talk about and Kate talks about and others, this managed retreat, this climigration, this getting us all into 15-minute cities, into the cities away from country and all this. It's all decided that way, isn't it? So.
And I'll flick that up. I was going to use this one next week, but this is an example of what they're really up to. So you've got Greta there saying that, you know, climate change is going to kill us all. We have to change everything. We have to dismantle our social and economic system. Then you've got the person on the right saying, or we could just build nuclear plants. And then Greta saying, I don't want to solve the problem. I want to dismantle the system.
Yep.
And that's our Marxist leftists.
That sums it up. Yep.
They want to burn everything down. They don't want to fix the problem, do they?
No, they do not. This is all part of a bigger plan, but that's why we do what we do. That's why you bring the information you do to hopefully wake people up, wake up Australia. And
hey, that'd be a good title for the show.
It would be a good title for the show. Who would have thought of that? Good one, legend. Oh, and I only got to finish off on one thing because you know what? I did actually see something this morning that I thought might interest you. And I'm not sure if you've been on X today at all. I know you've been preparing, you had other things and that as well, but I did want to cover it because I thought you might have a couple of comments about this. So I wanted to just bring this up and show you this little bit of a thread from a friend, and our friend is an ex WHO professor. Do you know, it was South Australian? Who do you reckon it is, mate?
Is it? It's not Professor Spurious. It's going to be Professor Esterman. Mask me harder, Esterman.
You've nailed it. So here we go, Bruce. I'm going to give you this thread. Professor Esterman, ex-WHO professor, as you are probably aware by now, I have just had my first COVID infection. This is 30th of December 24. I thought I'd explain what it was like for those who are still novids. I woke up on the 12th of December feeling very unwell and wobbly. I took my temperature and it was close to 40. I had a severe frontal headache. I did a RAT and within seconds it came out positive. I gave my GP practice a call and was soon online to a GP. After checking my medical history, including current medications, he decided that I was unable to have the oral antiviral Paxlovid and instead recommended remdesivir infusions.
I 100% support that, Mark. I reckon he should be on double dose remdesivir.
I know why, but anyway, he then got me admitted to my home hospital, a hospital in the home service in South Australia. A few hours later, a doctor turned up at my home to give me an ECG and make sure that I could take remdesivir. He also inserted a cannula ready for the infusion. For the next few days, I had a terrible cough and sinus congestion, relieved to some extent by the frequent inhalations. That afternoon and the following 2 afternoons, a nurse came to give me the infusions. After the third, I was definitely feeling a bit better. On the 23rd of December, I had my first negative RAT. It is now nearly 3 weeks since the diagnosis. I still have a cough, although it has subsided a lot. Unfortunately, because of a pre-existing condition, the virus has caused a huge drop in my hemoglobin, leaving me very anemic and tired. So we are monitoring that to make sure that it recovers. Overall, it has not been a very pleasant experience. For most younger people, I can see that COVID infection may not be a huge deal, but for those of us who are older or who have chronic conditions, I can also see how they can go rapidly downhill. My thanks go out to my GP who sensibly put me on remdesivir. My thanks also to great service from my home hospital staff. So there you go. That's I wanted to share that because I thought you might find that a bit humorous, but that Professor Esterman sharing that in there, and look. I'm pretty sure that he's just doing the service, you know, and letting the public know that, you know, how best to take care of themselves and that he's been in good hands, and, you know, not wanting to flog a dead horse or anything. I'm pretty sure, Bruce. But what's your thoughts on that little thread there from Professor Adrian Esterman?
Well, I'm shocked, I tell you.
Mm.
I'm shocked that Professor Esterman is admitting that he's not fully up to date with his vaccines, because if he was, he wouldn't have got sick, would he?
Oh, well, it's meant to be safe and effective, isn't it? And, you know,
Well,
so.
didn't 10% Biden tell us that if you have your injections, you won't get COVID? I'm pretty sure he told us that.
Yeah, no, I heard that. So, you know, Mr. Esterman needs to get up to date on his boosters, I think.
Now, I'm going to tell you a little story out of school, because Professor Esterman and I actually go back a very long time, because when I was a student at Adelaide Uni doing my epidemiology honours degree, I constructed a data set out of the work I'd been doing, and I had to analyse it, which means I needed a statistician, because statistics was not my forte. So I was told to consult the South Australian government statistician. And that was a person called Dr. Esterman, some relation.
Mm.
And so I said to Dr. Esterman, okay, here's the work I've done. Here's the numbers I've got. How do I analyse this? And he told me I had to do one of two statistical treatments on it. I could do either what's called logistic regression or linear regression analysis. And I had no idea what these things were. So I actually went away and did a bit of homework, and I set up a little matrix. So I made up a data set, very small data set, so I could run it through the analysis knowing what the answer would be. And I did that, and I did it a few times, and it didn't make any sense to me. So I eventually went back to Professor Esterman and said, I don't get this. It's not working for me. I don't understand what's going wrong. And he said, you know, leave it with me and I'll get back to you. Anyway, he did get back to me, and it turned out that Professor Esterman had actually been using this analysis method wrong forever. So the state government statistician had been advising people wrongly. And tell you what, there's a bit of a history of that going around, isn't there? Such that a junior researcher had actually showed him up. And I heard back along the grapevine that the said professor was, quote, extremely shocked. So I might just throw that in the old trust the experts pile. What do you think?
I think so.
My corollary to that is, of course, you should never trust the experts, or you must always check the work of experts.
Yes, it takes one expert to call out another expert.
But I do send my best wishes to Professor Esterman, and I hope that the remdesivir makes him better very soon. And if it doesn't, perhaps he could contact me about ivermectin.
That's right. Yes, antivirals that have been shown to work really effectively. But anyway.
Run death is near. Look that one up too.
I know. I'll have to edit that out. I'm starting when I upload to my Substack now. I've got this option of automatically uploading to YouTube, and I swore I wouldn't do that, but I'm having a go at it. And so there's two of my videos that have stuck on YouTube. The one with Stuart Lindsay got removed, as you can imagine. So so what I'm thinking about doing is doing a couple where I kind of have to bleep out certain words, and it might make it stick, but we'll see how we go. I'll see if I could be bothered.
You're not allowed to say vitamin I anymore?
No, well, I think anything that you mentioned that, you can't mention the C word and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, just medical disinformation, Bruce, don't you know?
Yes. Yes.
All right, legend. Well, thank you very much again, as usual. And I'm wishing all of our viewers, all that people that have been following us along diligently, wishing you all a very, very happy new year. I hope you do it safely, with love of others and family, and really looking forward to continuing to spend time with you into the new year, my dear friend, and putting some more episodes together if you'll continue to be willing. And we just wish everybody all the very best for the new year, as well as you, my friend.
And perhaps off the cuff, what are my New Year's resolutions? To become or continue to be an adult, independent, responsible for myself, a good neighbour, a good father, a skeptic of the government, and a free citizen who says and does what he thinks is right.
Yeah. Here, my friend, and I'll follow suit. I'll follow suit. Good on you, mate. Many
See you in
blessings.
25.
See you next year, brother. See you next year.
Ciao.
To fight again for that already burned, he was driven towards the flames. All the signs are there for all to see, the signs we've lost our way. When we jail our heroes and applaud our villains and turn our hearts away, like a silent choir, too scared to sing the anthem of a braver day. A song our children may never hear, the ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix. A song our children may never hear, the ballad of Dr. Bruce Paix.